Yo, Deva. Tell Newton to lift up everything. Yo, Psycho, yo, banger.
First and foremost, free the whole world, boss. I am your gracious host, Caspian Montgomery. Welcome, Gaza Nation, to another episode of the Vybz Kartel Show. Today, we will be breaking down the brand new song Sociopath to the patois illiterate, and I would just like to request a favor from the boss. Please stop making my job so tough. I had to spend hours researching your verses on this one. It is a lyrical masterpiece. So without further ado, teacher, please begin.
Man a killer from birth, real psychopathic sociopath. My psyche fall a show so far, me like the fears. Strike you with a motor car and photograph the scene and boast of how you scream. Knock him out, a dose of holy feet.
Ardy the Innocent begins the first verse by stating that he was born a killer, and then he says that he is a real psychopathic sociopath, and I must distinguish what a sociopath and a psychopath is. A psychopath tends to live on the fringes of society. They are very antisocial. They sometimes cannot hold a job, and they tend to be very violent and aggressive. A sociopath, on the other hand, they can blend in with society. They understand how to mimic human emotions, but they themselves do not have a conscience. So he is a mixture of both, and that is very scary. I tend to lean more towards a sociopath than a psychopath. And then he says his psych evaluation, it shows that so far that he is suffering from both of these mental disorders. And then he says that he is likely to strike you with a motor car. He is likely to get in a vehicle and run you down with it, which is a very violent crime compared to gun crimes. And then he says he will photograph the scene after he strikes you with his vehicle and then boast to everyone else of how you screamed in agony and pain. He will actually gain some pleasure from that. And then he said he will knock you out with a dose of Holyfield, and that is Evander Holyfield, the legendary boxer, world champion, might I add. He's going to knock you out just like Holyfield could. So this man, after you are hit with a motor vehicle, he's going to walk upon you and then knock you out cold. It is just a really, truly psychopathic scene that he is painting right there.
Me captivate the fans like coke, I hold the fiend. Me do this easier than breathing. That's another album by this evening. That's another billboard banger.
Our great Gaza leader then says that he captivates the fans like cocaine, just like cocaine. And then he says he holds the fiends. So he is saying that his music is a drug, and all of Gaza Nation are fiends for the music, for the lyrics, and he is delivering the highest, the purest cocaine available. So that is why Gaza Nation is so strong. And then he says he does this easier than breathing, and this is by far my favorite line in the song. He says that he makes music easier than breathing, and the reason why it is my favorite is because I believe this to actually be true, and I don't believe any other artist in the world could say this and it be true. And then he breathes, and then he says, that is another album by this evening. Just think of that line. It is the most amazing line I have heard in a long time, because it is true. I've never seen a man put out so much music in one lifetime. It is just simply astonishing. And then he says, so he breathes one more time and he says, and that is another billboard banger. And he has so many hit songs, so many classic songs. He can just simply breathe, and he's either going to have another album or another classic masterpiece. And that is just by far one of my favorite lyrics. that I've heard in quite a long time, if not my favorite lyric of all time.
Yo, ears, yo, fear, fierce one, new tone, rise the bomber, scammer, hammer to the copper, proper burial, we mad medical, we had Senegal, we too lyrical.
One Dawn then acknowledges Hayes, which is a settlement in Clarendon, and then he bigs up Phase 1 and Newtown, which are both in Portmore in St. Catherine. So he is bigging up Jamaica as he always does. I don't know any other artist who bigs up more places in Jamaica. And then he says, rise the bomber. So he says, rise the bomber. And a bomber is a big rifle, not a tiny pistol or handgun. And my preferred bomber is an M16 with an M203 attached to it. And then he says, scammers. So he's bigging up the scammers. And then he says, hammer to the copper. So if you do know how a firearm works, when you pull the hammer back and then you press the trigger, the hammer smashes into the copper round circle on the bullet, and the bullet then releases. And he says when he does that, there will be a proper burial, because he is a marksman, so he's not going to miss. He's going to hit a vital organ, and you will be buried. And then he says that we are mad. And then he says medical. And there are many mad doctors and mad scientists that have been throughout history. They have been documented. So he is a mad scientist. And then he says we are hot. And then he says Senegal. And Senegal is in Africa. Big up Senegal. And it is very hot in Africa. And then he says we are too lyrical. He's too lyrical for any of the competition. He just he is a dancehall dictionary.
Teacher, school principal, chancellor, the boss of the world, gone with your girl, niece, auntie, leave panty, lean pan me, feel long dick, please stop dick.
The dancehall king then goes into a lyrical onslaught, as he tends to do frequently, and he says that he is the teacher, the school principal, the chancellor. He is the highest ranking member of anything that he involves himself with. And then he says he is the boss, Adi, the world boss. He is in charge of the entire universe. And then he says he's gone with your girl. So if and I hope this doesn't happen to you, but if Adisha meets your girlfriend, she is going to be gone, leaving with him, which is very, very sad for you. And then he says it doesn't matter if it is a niece, an auntie, he is going to leave with their panties. Their panties are going to be gone. And then he says to the women, lean upon me, and then you will feel a long penis. And then he says, please stop tick. And I don't know why he wants the woman to stop ticking on him, but he is just going into lyrical overdrive here.
Please got this, do it angry, eat from me, clean body, sweet addy, you're my motherfucker.
The boss of all bosses then says that he has a breeze penis, and I believe that means that he's just going to come through and hit you one time, and then he will be done with you. He's moving on to the next woman. And then he says he's doing it angry, so he's not going to give her nice, passionate sexual relations. No, he's going to do it very violently. And then he says, eat from me. So I'm going to assume that he is asking the woman to drink his sperm. And then he says he has a clean body, sweet Adi. And then he says he is mad. And then he says an expletive, which I will not repeat, but he reaffirms that he is psychopathic. And with that last line, we have reached the glorious chorus.
Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic sociopath. Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic sociopath. Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic sociopath. Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic real sociopath.
Gaza Nation, I truly enjoyed this chorus. It is very simple. It is just repeating real psychopathic sociopath. But the scratching, do you hear the scratching in there? That is one of my favorite old hip-hop techniques. It is very DJ Premier-esque, and I do appreciate that it's being brought back here, and whoever was cutting up on the ones and twos, they did a wonderful job with that. Bravo.
Yo, man, skiller than German school, skiller than hard trust NTA, skiller than the NBA, skiller than cool skill, skill archie, skill cool, my rifle steel soul.
The dancehall hero begins the second and final verse by going on a complete tangent that if you do not know what he is talking about, it would just sound like gibberish, but I will try to break it down so the patois illiterate do understand what he's saying here. He says, the man is skiller, meaning himself. The man is skiller than German school, skiller than the Heart Trust NTA. The German school is an automotive school in Jamaica, and the Heart Trust NTA, HEART is an acronym meaning Human Employment and Resource Training. So, and it was founded by Prime Minister Siega in the 80s. So this school, if you are accepted, is highly trained individuals. So he has more skill than everyone who has attended that school. Then he says he is has more skills than the NBA, so he has more skills than all the basketball players in the world, and that is amazing in itself. And then he says he has more skill than Schillaci. He is still cold, and Schillaci is an Italian football player, one of the greats who played soccer, as they call it, football. He's that, so he's still cold. He still has the same skills that he had 20 years ago. So he just went off on a tangent there, and when I first heard it, before I researched it, I was saying, what is he saying right there? But now that I have researched it, it makes perfect sense.
Great one like sea stone. Great standard time greatest. Figure it out, I'm going in me ever up. What is a down? Me rep the country and for town a port more. Me find me sound Waterford. Black 4, Black 5, ever la.
The teacher begins by saying Greek bone like sea stone, and I find that very hard to interpret. I do know that there was a Greek bone found recently that proves that Africans migrated to Europe a lot earlier than previously suggested. I also do know that sea stones are also known as aquamarines. They are believed to be the spiritual stone in Greek mythology, and there is a story where I cannot remember the names, forgive me, but in order to do something, someone was told to throw the stones of their mother over their back, and the stones meant the bones over their back, and that meant stones, and they were speaking of Mother Gaia, so it is Greek mythology, but I do not know exactly what he was talking about in that line. And then he says, great standard time, greatest, figure it out, and I have been ruining my brain and researching all day trying to figure out what that means, and all I can come up with is that standard time is the greatest time of all, and people who do go into daylight savings time or mess with the time, they are just they are not following the real. So I'm going to assume that that means he is always up to the time, and he is the greatest and everyone else is copying. That is how, what I surmise from that line. And then he says he is going in, and yes he is, because my mind is blown by these lyrics. And then he says that he is ever up, what is down? So he asks the question, what is down? He's never been there before. He is always on the top of the mountain. He is always sitting on the throne. He doesn't even know what it's like to be down, no matter what circumstances he is in. And then he says he reps for country and downtown. So he reps for all the country people of Jamaica, and he also reps for all the city people of Jamaica, and we do know this is true. And then he says Portmore is where he found his sound. So Portmore, St. Catharines, Jamaica, that is where he developed this incredible talent. And then he bigs up Waterford, Block 4, Block 5, they are ever live. There's always something going on there, and that is the true origins of the Gaza. So just completely mind-blowing lines right there.
Never drive, psycho, shoot, bang, and drop, bam. We not cheerleader, but pam, pam. San Francisco do the tang sang, hot sang. What's wrong? Baby, shake your bam, bam. Backside, that's right.
I believe that the world boss might be just showing us that he is truly psychopathic with these lyrics, and none of us might be able to decipher these without him explaining them to us. But he says, Deva drive, psycho, shoot, bang, and drop bomb. So he is saying that the people from Deva drive, they will shoot you, they will throw grenades at you. And then he says, we are not cheerleaders, but pom-pom. So that is a double entendre. We are not cheerleaders, but cheerleaders, they shake pom-poms when they are cheering. And he says, we are not cheerleaders, we are not celebrating the other side, but pom-pom. So he's giving 2 gunshots. And then he says, San Francisco does this thong song. So again, Cisco was the creator of the thong song, so I do know that is a double entendre, but I do not know what San Francisco has to do with the thong song. And then he says, hot song, what's wrong? Asking the question, and it was a very wonderful song when it did come out. And then he says, baby, shake your bum. So he says, he's talking to a woman, he's saying, shake your gluteus maximus, and then he says, bauxite, that's right. And all I do know is that bauxite is a reddish clay. It's rock sediment made up of minerals and aluminum. So I do not know exactly what he's getting at with those lines. It is very psychopathic, that writing, but it goes together so wonderfully.
Waterford, Portmore, represent a teacher list. Top striker, FIFA feature list. Rat for dead, set the trap. Eager this. Rat for dead, set the trap. Yo, my motherfucker.
The greatest artist of all time then says, Waterford, Portmore. He is again repping his hometown, and he says, represent. That was one of my favorite Vybz Kartel songs from back in the day. Portmore represent, and then represent Portmore, I'm sorry. And then he says, this is a Deja. He's reminding you that he is always representing Portmore. Then he says he is a top striker, FIFA feature list. So, he's top strikers in football. They are the greatest, and top strikers in the streets are also the greatest. So he is on the FIFA featured list for strikers, if you know what I mean. And then he says, rat fi dead. So he's saying that all rats, all snitches should die, and I agree with that, Adija. And then he says, we will set the trap. And then he says the question, Ika dis, and that is a reference to Ika Mouse, who was a very famous dancehall musician a long time ago, and recently, last year, he was moving very shaky on the internet, very low. He was acting very strange last year. So it's a diss to Ika. That is a double entendre. He's asking, is it Ika? And then it's an Ika diss? So that is a very, very mad line. And then he repeats it. He says, rats should die. We will set the trap. And then he just laughs. He knows what he was saying before. And then again reminds us that he is mad. He has a few screws loose in his brain. He is a true psychopathic sociopath. And Gaza Nation, this was one of the toughest songs I've ever tried to decipher. I hope that you appreciate it, because it was very taxing to do, and if there's any corrections that you would like to make, please leave them in the comment section. Please help us decipher this masterpiece. And with that last line, we have reached the end of another Vybz Kartel masterpiece. Gaza Nation, as always, thank you for tuning in. Please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell so you do not miss an episode. This was a very long episode, so I will not take up any more of your time. Until we meet again, it is Gaza, me say, forever.
Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic sociopath. Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic sociopath. Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic sociopath. Real psychopathic sociopath. Psychopathic real psychopath.